After playing 14 seasons in the National Football League for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Brad Meester retired and moved his family of 6 daughters and his wife back to Mount Vernon, Iowa, where he settled down and became the offensive coordinator at Mount Vernon High School. In part 2 of our conversation with Coach Meester, we're going to talk a little bit about how he goes out of his way on a daily basis to try to connect with his players on the football team. We'll also discuss some of the challenges associated with the football culture and maybe sporting culture in general that Coach Meester has both experienced and maybe that he would like to see change in the coming years. And finally, as he's transitioned into not only being a high school coach, but also the father of 6 daughters who are all athletes. And in fact, one of them will play for our program this year. We're going to talk to Brad about how he approaches being a dad in the stands and how he navigates some of those conversations on the home front. You're listening to the Coaching Culture Podcast, brought to you by TOC Culture Consulting. My name is Nate Sanderson, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host JP Nurbin. If you're new to the TOC community or to the podcast, please visit thriveonchallenge.com to sign up for our newsletter, where you can get the podcast notes delivered directly to your inbox every Thursday morning, as well as other articles that will help you to grow your leadership and the culture within your program. Now, let's get back to our conversation with former NFL great Brad Meester. I want to ask you a couple of questions just about your experience now, as a football coach. You, I think, came to Mount Vernon and were working with the line for a while, and then climbed up and have a little bit more responsibility now, working with Coach Kinake with the offense in general. I think one of the things that we find with football coaches that we work with is because there's so many players on the roster. When I look at my basketball roster, we might have 30 girls out for basketball this year, and there's 4 or 5 of us as coaches. It's a lot easier to maybe have some of those personal connections and build those relationships with individuals because the ratio is so much smaller. You guys have more than double, I'm sure, that number of players out. What are some things that you do to try to have that impact on the players that you're working with and build some of those connections and relationships?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of kids. I mean, we have 70 some kids out, and sometimes it's hard, to have that close connection with every one of them. Obviously, my connection with the offensive line is probably closer than a lot of the other ones because that's just the guys I deal with every day. I mean, I'm always with them. But I think it's really just making a conscious effort every day to just try to interact with somebody maybe you haven't talked to in a while. I mean, I know one of the big things that Coach Peterson has always told us to do is like during stretch. Obviously, we have the whole team there during stretch. They're going back and forth stretching. Is instead of just having a conversation with the other coaches, instead of just hanging out with the guys you always talk to, go find somebody else and just ask how their day was. Maybe it's somebody you haven't talked to in a long time. Ask how school was, how their day was, simple things like that. You never know. Maybe they got something that's heavy on their heart that they haven't shared with anybody. That's just that one moment that they love to hear somebody ask how they're doing. So I think just little things like that, and just making that conscious effort every day to just try to talk to each and every as many as you can. And just continue to do that. Ask how they're doing, not just talking to them about football. Not walking up to them and say, "Hey, you need to do this block," but just asking how, as like Coach Thomas said, if all I've taught you is X's and O's, then I failed. It's about asking personal questions, ask how they're doing, things like that. So I think just making that effort each and every day to try to interact as many as you can. 70 guys is a lot of guys. You're not going to get them all in one day, but just little by little, just keep talking to people, show that you care. And I say show that you care, but they do. They mean a lot to me. That football family is literally a family. I think that's with any coaching. They become part of your family. And I've said this to the old line kids all the time. I said, during the season, I spend more time with you than I do my own kids. And it seems weird, but that's the absolute truth. There's a lot of times that, my kids are off to school. And then after school, I'm at football for whatever it is, 3-4 hours sometimes. By the time I get home, I might see my kids for an hour and a half. They are legitimately part of my family. So just getting to know each and every one of them, continue to interact with them. And that continues even after they're done playing in high school. Just how they're doing in college, things like that. Just trying to keep that close relationship because they are part of our family.
You've obviously been impacted by Coach Thomas, and you've referenced him a number of times, even today, many years from when you were playing for him in high school. Our friend, the podcast, TJ Rosine, likes to ask this question of coaches, so I'm going to put this on you as well. But TJ likes to imagine, that rocking chair moment when your coaching career is over, and maybe you're sitting on a Harley and not a rocking chair, but just bear with me here, right? That you look back and think, I hope that I impacted the players that played for me in what way? What do you want that lasting impact for guys that played for Coach Meester to be saying about what their experience was like with you 10, 15, 20 years down the road?
That's a great question. I just hope, I think of the big thing for me is just hoping that they understand. Obviously, I want to have a huge impact on them. I want to influence their life. I want to, create kids of character. Kids that obviously want to always go out and do the right thing, be great people. But I think one of the biggest things is just understanding that we do care about them, that they mean a lot to us, and that no matter what happens, no matter what happens in their life, that if they need somebody to talk to, they're not afraid to give one of us coaches a call. Because they mean a lot to us, and I think that's probably one of the big things. I just, obviously we teach so many things, about hard work and character and all those things, but I just really want them to understand that, they mean a lot to us. That if anything comes up, I want them to call. I want them to say to talk to us about it, things like that.
So we obviously started this podcast years ago because we believe in transformational leadership, and we value things like very similar things when it comes to players feeling seen, known, loved, cared about. And also because we feel like there's a change needed in the culture. Like in many ways, the things that we've observed as coaches and parents is that our sporting culture is not always headed in the right direction. And you've given me hope, for a lot of for a lot of other athletes out there, that they're going to have a great experience. But I guess I'd just be curious, as a professional athlete, and now as a coach and as a father to 6 girls, where do you really, especially in particular football culture, like what would you like to see change? Like where would you like to see coaches across the board or really try to embrace when it comes to how they lead, how they coach? Where is the need for change greatest in football culture?
Um, I- it's probably going back to like what I just said. I think so many times, this is the way sports are. Sports are win and loss driven sometimes. It's about winning games, winning championships, things like that. And obviously, we will all want to win games. We're not. I'm not going to lie to you. We want to win games, but I think it just has to come to that point where it's about the kids, and their experience and their growth more than wins and losses. Because in the end of the day, but it's great. Whatever your record is, or you win a state championship. I was fortunate enough to win a state championship in high school, but it doesn't impact the rest of my life. That's not what changed the rest of my life. It was the culture that we had and the coaches that we had caring about me that impacted the rest of my life. It's not the wins and losses that did. It was that experience. And I think just continuing to push that, listen, sometimes, somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose every game, and nobody likes losing it, but we can still grow. We can still grow as a group, grow as a family through a loss. And sometimes, so as of right now, we lost the last 2 games, but that doesn't make us bad people or bad players or anything else. I think there's a lot that was gained from that. I think our kids are getting a lot from it. They're learning life lessons right now. We're pushing through it. They're not giving up. They continue to fight and continue to rally around each other. So I'm excited to see that, because I've talked to them a lot of times. We all talk to them. Life isn't perfect. Sometimes it's just not. Things things go wrong. What do you do? Are we going to sit and pout, when things don't go our way, or are we going to, rally around each other and stand up and do something about it? And so, even though we've had 2 losses in a row, I think we are still learning life lessons here. We are growing as a group, growing as a family. And I think those things will make a difference later on in life. And I think and I think that has to be the push. I mean, for staffs everywhere and it's hard sometimes. I mean, because obviously jobs rely on winning, but just realizing, there's more to life than just the wins and losses, and score, and things like that.
My friend Andy Landers always talks about the stain that coaches and teachers can leave on kids, and sometimes that can be a incredibly positive experience that propels them forward, and other times they can look back and their memories, in some ways stain in a negative way, what their experience was like. And I couldn't agree with you more. I wish more coaches just had an awareness of that, of that kind of impact that we can create if we're intentional about our approach and about how we do that. But I want to shift gears here. We got a couple more lines of questioning for you, and then we'll get you out of here. When JP and I were doing just a little background here, trying to get ready for our conversation today, we came across the story of the interaction that you had with Luke Akerstrom when you were at, did I say that last name right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, when you were in Jacksonville. And to me, as I read that, I just thought it's so awesome to be able to leverage the platform that you had as an athlete to have an incredible impact on this family. And I wonder if you could just kind of share that story with our listeners, of kind of what transpired there.
So so what had happened there was obviously, not obviously, but every week, we get the opportunity. Our day off is on Tuesdays as a player, and we get the opportunity. A lot of times our PR guy will give us different opportunities to do different things. I mean, a lot of them are signing autographs at different places, or we can go to some charity things, or we have the opportunity to visit hospitals. And so Ryan Robinson was our PR guy, and he just happened to call me and said, "Hey, I got this." It was from, I don't know how he had gotten who it was, but he said, well, there's this kid that's in the hospital. Just wanted to see if you could just go visit him. And so we were like, yeah, we don't have anything. My wife and I didn't have anything going on. So we said, yeah, we'll go and visit, and just see how he's doing. But ends up, and I don't remember his age at the time. I think it was 6 or 7. I think he was the same age as one of our kids. He was in the back seat of a car. Perfectly normal kid, great kid. In the back seat of the car, and in an instance, in a second's notice, whatever, in a moment, he had seizures in the back of the car. And so obviously, they pulled the car over and pulled him out, went to the hospital. And so when we had gotten to the hospital, he could say a couple words. He only had a few words he could say, couldn't walk. And he didn't have mobility, anything like that. And so it impacted, it had a huge, Jamie and I left there and just thinking, that's a kid that's the same age as our kids, that in an instant, his life changed. So, we wanted to go back and visiting him, just see how he was doing. So every week we kept going back to the hospital. And the story, obviously he talks about how the family says how we kept coming and how we had an impact on them. But to be honest with you, he had a huge impact on us. We kept going back as we learned so much. He impacted our lives. We would bring the kids to the hospital with him. It was an emotional thing because he was a kid, an everyday kid. Happened, but you could see him just continue to fight, continue to want to get better. A kid that couldn't walk, couldn't talk, or you could say a few words, and then all of a sudden, each time we came back, you could see just that never-ending resilience. Like he wanted to get better. He wanted to get better. He kept fighting. All this got thrust on him. He didn't argue. He didn't complain. I never heard him complain. He just kept working. And I remember going to the hospital. Jamie and I went, and he had to get shots upon shots, and that could not have been easy. And I remember I could hear him. He was crying in the background in the room, but he never complained about it. Obviously, I know that was hard for him, but he never complained. He just kept working. And as we kept coming back, you could see him just continuing to get better. You could see he was gaining. He could start putting full sentences together. He was talking. And then it's like his mission was to be able to walk. He wanted to be able to take a step. And he had said he wanted to take his first step on the field, on the football field. He was a huge football fan, huge Jaguars fan. Wanted to be able to take his first step on the football field. And I mean, it's a moment I'll never forget. He came out. They brought him out after one of our practices. It was training camp. After one of our practices, and he stood there and he took his very first step that he'd ever taken. I was, crouched down, and he took his very first step ever towards me. And I still remember that to this day. It was unbelievable to see what this kid had gone through, continue to fight, and be able to take his first step like that. And it was sometime later. He actually, it was a Cincinnati Bengals game, and he stood on the sideline beside us, and then fully walked out by himself. He led us out there for the coin toss on the Cincinnati Bengals game, which is absolutely amazing. And now, he's, we see him all the time when we come back. Obviously they still live in Florida. They still live in Jacksonville. Every time we come back, we get together with them. And it's crazy to see his progress. I mean, he is a fully normal kid in high school. It's been absolutely awesome. And, a lot of that keeps saying, obviously we kept going visiting. Well, it was because he made such an impact on us. I mean, he really did. He changed our lives. He changed our kids' lives. And really came back down to, sometimes you never know, like when you give your time or relationships you make, you never know when that one instance will make such a huge impact in your life. You really don't. And I've said this before to even our own kids, about relationships and treating people the right way, because you just never know when that one relationship or just a few words to somebody could have a huge impact on your own life. And in that situation, we thought it was just a visit. It was just, we're going to visit the kid in the hospital like we do every Tuesday. We'll be there half hour, come home. It was not that case. That half hour that we gave up changed the rest of our lives, changed our kids' lives. So I think it's, I always push that, whenever you can, helping somebody out or taking time for somebody, always treating people the right way, because you just never know when that moment is, you really don't, when that moment's going to change the rest of your life.
That's an incredible story of, obviously you've shared a lot of stories today of just how you're intentional in the locker room as a leader, and as an athlete. You've shared some of how you were trying to be intentional as a coach on the football field, but also just and living out, what you believe about being a good person, but also your faith, as you shared there earlier. But also about intentionality as a father, right? Like in just how you raise your kids and your family, and you've got quite a big family there, 6 kids. So my question for you is, I actually experienced just this last Saturday or Sunday, one of my children's first competitive sporting games ever. So it was my first experience there, and I have to say, I think I got a little too much into it. So give me some advice, because I know, you're, one of your daughters, I think, is going to be playing for Nate here in the next few years. So I know you're going to be the best sports parent ever. So give me some advice here about just kind of your approach when it comes to, parenting your children in the sports area.
My approach has been this is the way I am, I enjoy just sitting in the stands and, I don't know, just watching my kids play and then just enjoying the moment. And obviously there's times where I get frustrated. But I never want to be that person that just gets crazy and yells at them, because here's the deal. They're high school kids. They're young kids learning the game. I don't want to ever be that guy that's, yelling and screaming at them, or yelling and screaming at other players from another team or teammates on our own team. Because guess what? They're high school kids. They make mistakes. It's going to happen. When we come home, we talk about it. We talk about, hey, what do you think you did well, and what do you think you got to get better? And it's not a yelling and screaming. I don't ever like to yell and scream about it. let's talk about what you did well, and let's talk about what we got to get better at, and how we're going to get better at. I mean, how do we improve? And that's just simple as all it is. And then when it comes to practice and things like that, then let's work at getting better at it. But I mean, my approach to my kids is I'm not a super vocal guy in the stands. I don't yell and scream. It didn't help me when I played. I mean, a lot of times I didn't even hear it. I mean, I blocked it out, just went and played. You know what I mean? And if somebody yelled at me, and my parents never yelled at me, but if they had yelled at me, I think it would have made it worse for me. You know what I mean? I think I would have been all flustered and things like that. So I just let them do their things. I enjoy it. Get my bag of popcorn and sit there and enjoy the game and have fun like any other spectator.
Well, I'm curious about this. You talk about having those conversations with kids at home, and I think sometimes it's hard for parents to find the fine line between being overbearing, mom and dad are coaching me at home, and being supportive and encouraging. How do you navigate that? Because I would imagine, I've only gotten to work with a couple of your daughters so far here at Mount Vernon, but they all have a little bit different personalities, and so how do you manage that, one to another when you're trying to have some of those conversations?
Um, I think it's just being real. I mean, all my kids are different. They're all different. And my oldest one, which is in college now, had a completely different personality than my younger ones. Obviously, Chloe fairly well. They are completely opposite personalities. You know what I mean? And sometimes I think just as a parent, just being realistic about it and what they can and can't do. Listen, I want all my kids to be Division I scholarship players. That would be awesome. But it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? They're not all going to be able to do that. And I think all I want them to do is have a great experience and just continue to work to get better. Never give up. I mean? Just continue each day, working to get better and just making the most of their God-given talents, whatever that is. I mean? Maybe it's not being a starter. I mean? Maybe it's not, but as long as you give your best, that's all I care about. Because each of us, and they all have different abilities. I mean, whether it's maybe, all my kids have different, personality differences, and they all have different athletic differences. They're all completely different. So I think it's just understanding that, being realistic about that, and just having conversation with them, just that they can go out and be the best that they can. I mean, understand that, they've come to that realization that they're not all going to be Division I stars. I mean? And there's not. But all that matters is later on is that they're great people, because all sports end. No matter what you do, no matter if you play in the NFL for 14 years or whatever you do, or you end at high school, sports end at some point. You know what I mean? And it's about being great people. And
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. I think sometimes it can be hard, especially for parents that have a long history in a sport where the relationship almost becomes subservient to the game instead of the game enhancing the relationship between a father and a daughter, for example. And so that's great perspective, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm glad we recorded that so I can hold you to it when we get to basketball season. But I want to get you out of here on this question, Brad. Let's talk about your ability in the red zone. So your last home game, Jacksonville, they call a screen pass for you here. You get the catch and the catch and run here. Don't quite make it to the goal line. How frustrating is it that your coaches didn't realize the potential you had as a scoring option in the red zone until your last home game?
I know they didn't realize how great a hands I had. I guess I don't know, but so yes, that was a tremendous opportunity, and I was so thankful. Obviously, that was my last home game, very last home game, and they honestly didn't have to do that for me. I know I'd been there 14 years, but the staff that was there, the owner that was there, everybody that was there, only been there 1 year. Gus Bradley, that was his first year. Jed Fish, the old coordinator, first year there. They didn't really know me that well. I mean? They had that year with me, but that was it. They had 1 year with me. So they had approached me that week leading up to the game that they were going to put in a pass for me. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I thought that was absolutely awesome and so thankful. I didn't think it was going to work, to be honest with you, because a lot of times teams will make tackles eligible. It's easy to make a tackle eligible. You know what I mean? So you just report eligible. It's a lot harder to make the center eligible because you have to move the center, the guy that snaps the ball every play. You have to actually physically move him from center out to like a tight end spot, and then bring in a whole nother guy to snap the ball. And not only that, I really didn't think it was going to work, because another great thing that they did for me was, obviously when we do pregame introductions, we usually introduce the entire offense or the entire defense. For that game, I was the only one that got introduced. They hadn't done that. As long as I'd been there, they hadn't done that. So that was it was absolutely awesome of them to do that. So I got introduced by myself for that home game. And so I thought, there ain't no way. I mean, it was the Titans. I thought, there ain't no way they're not going to figure this out. They just introduced me by myself that this was my last home game. And then we're going to move me from center to a tight end. And it's not like you can just hide it. You actually have to report eligible. So they announced on the to the stands that 63 is reported eligible. I thought, no way this thing's going. But the goal was to do the play about the 6-7 yard line, score a touchdown. Worked beautifully all week in practice. The lane parted like the Red Sea, and I ran right in for a touchdown every time. Well, on that play, we had just had a huge play. It was like 40, 50 yard play, big play downfield. I had gotten all the way down there, and I was absolutely exhausted, like super tired. And all of a sudden, here they come running in. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to run this play. Like, this is legitimately happening. And we were further out than expected. I think we were at the 14 or something. They were just afraid that we wouldn't get back inside the tight red like that and be able to run it. They wanted to make sure we could run the play. So we ran it from there. I couldn't have been more nervous in my life. I played a ton of games, you know what I mean? And, playoff games, with crazy crowds, just screaming. I have never been more nervous in my life, because as an offensive lineman, if you get one opportunity in your entire life to catch a ball, if you drop it, you'll never hear the end. I didn't want that to happen. Like, I was nervous. I was scared. So yeah, we line up. I reported eligible, went out to tight end, and instantly I'm thinking, this ain't gonna work, because there's a guy right over me. There's a defensive back right over me. He's got me. He sees it. We ran in motion, and all of a sudden he ran with emotion and disappeared. I thought, oh my gosh, I might actually be open on this. So we ran it, and yep, he threw it. I got thrown the ball, caught it, luckily caught it. But then, obviously, if anybody's seen it, after that, it became a blur. Like, I had been through my career, offensive line play had slowed itself down. When you move out to tight end, it was fast. Like, it was quick. So I caught that ball, and I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know where to go. I ran into one of my linemen, like in the back of him. Thought I found the lane and took off. And listen, secondary guys are fast. You know what I mean? They closed that down way faster than I thought they would. So I got 7 yards. I got the first down, but I did not get the touchdown. But it was still awesome. I mean, it was a great experience. Couldn't be more thankful for the Jaguars for doing that for me, allowing me to get a catch, things like that. I thought that was absolutely awesome with them. And yeah, so I still have the football, all that stuff. It's on the wall. So, but yeah, 1 for 1. I might have missed out. Maybe my calling was tight end. I don't know. So.
I appreciate you sharing that story. It shows, how significant even something small, in many ways was really big for you, and kind of comes back to that first question around, it's a business, but here people cared about you, and your impact. And it obviously, they kept you around for that many years. They obviously liked you, and you had a good impact on the culture and the locker room. And so we just appreciate you coming today to the podcast to share with us your experiences, your insights. It's just been a real pleasure to be here with you and learn from you.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's been awesome being on here, and just thank you guys again for letting me, share some of my stories,
Well, that'll do it for us here on the Coaching Culture Podcast. Special thanks to Brad Meester for joining us over the last 2 weeks. Stay tuned next week as JP and I will be talking a little bit about how to think through your preseason parent meetings, some things to consider as you're planning to engage your parent community prior to the start of your season.